Sociology is all about explaining the social world. What causes criminal behavior? Who's most likely to go to college? How are religion and divorce related? These are the kinds of questions that a sociologist would ask, and of course we've got an extensive toolkit to go about answering them. In this unit we're looking at the overall research process, and among the things that we're exploring is what constitutes a good research question and a good research design. There's a lot of material that we'll be covering in these first few weeks, so be sure to do all the reading and take notes. What I want to do in this lecture is to just highlight a few core concepts and issues to really drive them home in preparation for your quiz and exam. So let's get started. Sociologists want to explain the social world, and to do so they use a particular type of logic and basis for truth. Specifically, their explanations are evidence-based. So how do we go about collecting good evidence, and how do we go about doing good research? To begin, we got to start with a good research question, and a good research question begins with a good review of the literature. I know this sounds boring, but unless we know what others have found, we're not going to know if someone's asked the exact same question and come up with a really good answer. The purpose of research is to build on the research of others. Let me give you an example here. Let's say we want to study domestic violence. We narrow our topic down to look at female victims of intimate partner violence. We go out and we read 1,000,001 books and articles about this particular topic, and we find something interesting. Most of the research has focused on female victims in heterosexual relationships. Very few have looked at women in same-sex relationships. So, our question becomes, do women in same-sex relationships experience intimate partner violence the same way that women in heterosexual relationships do? Here, we're asking a question about a pressing social issue, and we're filling a gap in the research. In developing research questions, keep in mind that there are different goals of research. Maybe you just want to describe a particular phenomenon. In this case, you would conduct what we call descriptive research. So in the example I just used, you may simply want to go out and interview women in same-sex relationships who are or have been victims of intimate partner violence so as to describe the phenomenon. Another type of research is exploratory. In this case, you want to do more than just describe. You want to explore in further depth a particular aspect of the problem. This typically involves in-depth qualitative research. A third type of research is explanatory. This is probably the most well-known or popular form of sociological research. And in this case, you want to do more than just describe or explore. You want to explain the phenomenon. Typically, this involves pinpointing a cause and an effect. And it usually involves really good quantitative data and some type of statistical form of analysis. Your book mentions a fourth type of research, and this is evaluation research. This is really similar to explanatory research, except that you're looking at the effects of a particular social policy or program. Again, descriptive and exploratory research are usually associated with qualitative methods. Explanatory and evaluation research are typically associated with quantitative methods. This isn't always the case, but generally this is how it falls out. Each of these types of research uses a different research process. Qualitative research is usually inductive. Here we go out and collect data, not really sure what we're going to find, because again, our purpose is to describe and explore. So we go out and we collect data with the goal of just figuring out what's going on out there. And then we use these data to develop a theory or an explanation for the social world. So data comes first, theory comes later. Quantitative research is typically deductive. Here we start with a theory, which we use to develop a hypothesis or a prediction about what we're going to find in the social world. For example, I might hypothesize that women in same-sex relationships who are victims of intimate partner violence will be less likely to seek some type of help to get out of that abusive relationship, like the help of a counselor or a social worker. Here, I suggest that an independent variable, in this case sexual orientation, will have an effect on a dependent variable, in this case the likelihood of seeking help. So once we've got our hypothesis, we go out, we collect data, and then we see if our hypothesis is supported by the data. All right, so in this case, first we start with theory, then we move to data. Once we've established our questions and defined our approach, we need to design our research with an eye on validity. Validity basically is the strength of our conclusions. How well have we done our research? And are our conclusions correct about the social world? There are three types of validity that we should always be tuned into when we think about our own research and when we read the research of others. The first type is called measurement validity. Here we want to ask, do our questions or indicators that we are using to measure a concept really measure the concept we want it to? So let me give you an example. Say we want to study marital satisfaction among newly married couples. We go out and we ask these couples, do you like your spouse? This is our measure of marital satisfaction, and this measure has a lot of problems. First of all, if you're going to measure a concept like marital satisfaction, you're probably going to want to ask a range of questions, because just asking one question, like, do you like your spouse, isn't going to really get at the complexity of this concept. Second, whether you like your spouse isn't the same thing as whether you like your marriage. And so in a way, we're not measuring marital satisfaction at all. The second type of validity is what we call generalizability. Can our findings be generalized to a larger population? So let's say that I want to go out and study the changing views of marriage among young American women. And I go out and I interview young women in my church, and I find that generally most of them expect to marry, and they expect to marry by age 25. In this case, my finding isn't generalizable to all young American women. Young women in my church are likely to have particular views of marriage given their religious beliefs. If I wanted to generalize to all young American women, I'd have to go out and interview a much more diverse group of young women to do so. Finally, there's causal validity. This is also known as internal validity. Does A really cause B? Suppose you find that younger people report higher levels of marital satisfaction, and so you conclude that the younger a person is, the happier in their marriage. But what if it's not age, but the number of years that a person has been married that really matters here? This could also explain your findings, because presumably a younger person has been married for a fewer number of years. In this case, you haven't established causal validity. Because in the social sciences, we go through a process called peer review. And basically, in this process, our research is reviewed by other social scientists who go through our research study with a fine-tooth comb, and to make sure that our questions are important, that our methods are sound, and that our findings are valid. If they find problems, they recommend that our research is not published. And this is how we ensure that only well-designed studies get published as part of a larger body of science. Sociological truth is not definitive. It's always the product of a particular research design, and some truths are stronger than others. As you read for this class and as you read for other classes, always look at the methods. Is the study well designed? And are you convinced by what the researcher is telling you? Thank you.